the building angle around what's happening in Ukraine, as the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement has appealed for 250 million Swiss francs to assist people affected by the conflict in Ukraine. International Red Cross and Red Movement Jess Lech, who's the Deputy Head of Operations, is in Budapest and joins us now as we try and get more detail. Jess, very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. Is there an indication at all as to how many people are currently affected by this conflict?
Well, yes, Mpho, I think that it's fair to say that all 44 million Ukrainians have been affected by these events, as well as their family members in other countries. I think that some of the most drastic impacts we're seeing are, of course, inside Ukraine. We're seeing a huge impact. Many people displaced inside Ukraine itself, taking shelter in train stations and bunkers. But also we've seen more than 1 million people cross over an international border to seek refuge in neighbouring countries. So we're seeing a massive number of people affected in big ways and small, but in particular, very serious humanitarian needs for large numbers of people there in the Ukraine.
What do we know about vulnerable people like the young and the elderly, or perhaps those with disabilities? Are there any efforts at all underway to move them out of those conflict-heavy areas?
Well, up until now, we've seen people self-evacuating and moving themselves with whatever means that they have. And you've seen, of course, many of that dramatic footage of people travelling on foot, by car, by train, in order to try to reach safe places. Many people are moving within Ukraine itself, and as I mentioned, 1 million who've managed to cross so far, and many more on the way. We have also seen that the vast majority of people who've exited Ukraine have been women and children. Estimates up to perhaps 60 or even 70% of people actually are children, which is, of course, demonstrates how important it is that we provide good care and support to these vulnerable people. So women, children, the elderly are among the vast majority of people who've been crossing over. In the early days, we saw people perhaps with more means and with family connections in neighbouring countries to be some of the first to move. But now as the situation becomes more desperate, we're seeing people with less means who've travelled further distances, who've suffered more and who've seen more shortages and more difficulties. So we're seeing people with higher humanitarian needs crossing the border, and sometimes not having a place to go to, not having family or other connections. And so, therefore, the support needs for those people crossing is growing day by day.
And in terms of the support and the humanitarian efforts, what is your organization offering? Because, you know, in our interaction here on Newzroom Afrika with some of the people in Ukraine, some from various countries, speaking about their priorities is to make sure that you've got your documents, your passport, and a bag with the very few necessities. But food is not something that people are considering, as they essentially were on the run at the very early stages.
We've seen a huge groundswell of support, and as you would know, Red Cross and Red Crescent National Societies are local organisations which organise through branches in each of their communities. And so we've got Red Cross National Societies in Ukraine, Romania, Hungary, Croatia, Poland, Slovakia, Russia, and also in those countries further afield, who are all self-organising to receive people at the border, to provide that basic assistance that people need. Food, water, warm clothes, in many cases first aid, psychosocial support. So we've had people self-organising as well as working through the Red Cross and the Red Crescent in these areas. So it's been a huge effort. We've received a great amount of support, some of it financial, but also in terms of material assistance. That is all going straight through to the people who need it the most. Of course, people need a place to sleep, and we've seen great generosity there. There is concern, of course, that you know, the capacity to absorb these large numbers is starting to reduce. So we need to get more systematic in the way that we respond to this event. Shelter is a massive issue both within Ukraine with the damage to so many buildings, but also ensuring that there's some safe and suitable shelter for those families that are crossing over outside of Ukraine as well.
As you and I were speaking, we showed live visuals of Kiev in Ukraine, almost resembling a ghost town. So when it comes to perhaps the efforts that are underway in reuniting separated families, how much of an impact do you think your organization can have there in getting those who may have lost each other in this chaos together?
Well, that's right. So, there are people who will be disconnected right now and because their people are on the move, different members of families. Unfortunately, we're not seeing too many separated children right now. Most of them are still moving with family members. But we're seeing many families separated as women and children and elderly cross the border or move to safer parts of the country. At the moment, many people are able to travel with mobile phones, and so therefore access to mobile phone credit and data is essential so that people can check in and keep contact with each other as they move. We will also no doubt have plenty of work to do as things progress when it comes to actually people who are unaccounted for. And so therefore there's going to be a lot of questions raised once hopefully things start to calm down in relation to perhaps people who might have been killed in the hostilities. And so we have to expect that that's going to happen. The Red Cross and Red Crescent also do wish to see that people are able to obtain answers around the fate of any people who go missing in a conflict situation. And so we'll be working very hard with the authorities to make sure that that information can be relayed to families as soon as possible.
What would you say are some of the other challenges that you're facing at this moment?
I think the biggest challenges within Ukraine itself just relate to safety. We have thousands of volunteers actually working with the Ukraine Red Cross, 3,000 volunteers, and they're all working incredibly hard within their communities. But we also know that they're all themselves affected by the conflict. Mm-hmm. And so therefore we need to make sure that we have safety for the people affected and for the people supporting them. Of course, information is also difficult. As I said, people are self-organising, including within branches and units of the Red Cross, and that's excellent. And we're undergoing a massive process at the moment to find out exactly what everybody's doing at each point along the chain, because it's been a huge groundswell in just over the period of 7 to 10 days. We've got an enormous mobilisation. It's been fantastic to see all of the work that's gone in, and we really appreciate every piece of work that's been undertaken by volunteers and the community to support each other during this time.
And in your appreciation, you've also made an appeal as the IFRC. What sort of appeal are you making?
Well, of course, right now what we really need is financial support to be able to reach out to people. There has been donations of material assistance, but this can become quite challenging to handle as it reaches large proportions. Actually, what people need is cash generally, so that they can buy the right clothes that fit them, so they can put a roof over their head, so they can buy appropriate food for themselves. And so we will be providing financial support as well through to people who are in crisis. Of course, it does cost money to run these emergency operations, to deliver those goods to people who need it. So rather than sending donated goods, we always ask for financial support so that the people themselves can make those choices with that support and make sure that they get what they need at the right time.
You make mention of people who are essentially organizing themselves in little groups to get by. But when it comes to your presence and perhaps communication mechanisms to ensure that people can access you and can access your work and efforts, how has that process worked?
Well, the great thing about the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement is that we are very much community-based. We have these small branches and units happening at the community level, but it's connected to a massive global mechanism. So therefore, we have world-class logisticians. We have top-level training. People are there able to provide information that's appropriate to people in their own language about their rights and responsibilities, about how to keep themselves safe, about how to move safely and protect themselves from COVID, for example. But at the same time, we've got a strong capability to come in from behind with relief items, with warehousing, with logistics, with the best health and mental health and technical advice, so that these community-based volunteers can also be reaching with the best possible quality and going to scale, which is one of the big challenges, of course, with the huge number of people we're seeing affected by this event.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. All the best to you and your team. Jess Lech, Deputy Head of Operations at the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Movement, speaking and describing the dire situation in Ukraine.